Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachak Wadash. Double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone, who rule very well, very beautifully. Double salutations be unto the Akim out here pushing this gospel of truth and sincerity to the best of their ability given to them by Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Peace, blessings, and salutations be unto the elect scattered abroad. May the election of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord willing, fall upon your houses. This is Brother Quanah Watt coming back at you, Lord will, with the edifying lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord will. It is edifying, Lord will. It is straight to the point. And, I came across this article. We're just going through reading some, article headlines, whatnot, and came across this one, man. And was reading as it says right here. It's on Newsbreak app. It says, "No forgiveness, no grace. A former Trump supporter is begging for help after ICE detained her dying father, and the online response is pretty ruthless." And see, this is something that, starting with our elder apostles, on down, right? The elder bishops, the elders, the Akim, right? Something that we've been saying, for years, right? Don't trust this damn devil. Right, don't be going and voting, to put, this damn devil, as your leader, right, your king, right? Because see, he is a deceiver, right? Esau, Edom, the self-proclaimed so-called white man, right? He's the devil that the Bible speaks of, right? And again, right, he is known for lying, known, right, for being a deceiver, right? Let's go to this precept real quick in Psalms, the 10th chapter. Psalms 10 and verse 7, just hitting the point, right? Speaking about the wicked, right? As you read in verse 2, it says, "The wicked in his pride doth persecute the poor." The poor are the Israelites, the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, right? We're the ones that are in, the barrios, the ghettos, the hoods, and just in the lowest, value neighborhoods and whatnot within really the world, right? The Israelites as a nation, right, we are the lowest of the low, right? We're the poor and the needy, right? See, Esau, Edom, right, has his sights, right, set on the Israelites, right? Going back to Ezekiel, the 35th chapter, the 5th verse, right? He has a perpetual hatred for the Israelites, and we see that, right? Which the Israelites, again, are you so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, right? As well as we do have, Israelites that look like the other nations, right? Which we call Israelite foreigners, right? They, through the lineage of their father, they're Israelites, but you got Israelites in all the nations, man, right? And everywhere where you see the Israelites at, right, we're at the bottom, It says, "Let them be taken in the devices that they have imagined." Again, it's talking about the wicked, right? Esau, Edom, right? Now let's drop down to verse 7. It says, "His mouth is full of cursing and deceit and fraud," right? "Under his tongue is mischief and vanity." So again, Esau, Edom is a liar, right? So we already saw right through the spirit, man. We already knew, right? Whether it be the left or the right side, whether it be a Democrat or Republican, right? We understand that these damn devils, right? They ultimately say, right, and try to, we're gonna, pass more laws for the so-called black folks, or we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, right? Always catering to, as far as when it comes to, their campaigns, trying to be, get in office, right? They always say they're going to do this, they're going to do that, they're going to do this, they're going to do that, but never do. Never do. Because again, they're liars, right? Esau, Edom is a liar, right? So we were telling y'all, hey, man, don't go and vote, right? First and foremost, right? That's in the law, right? For you, not to ultimately, to put a king, to put a heathen, right, as king over you. I think that's in Deuteronomy. No, that's what does it say? King over thee. (17, 15). Right, right. Deuteronomy 14 and 17 and 14. It says, when thou art come into the land which Yahweh thy power giveth thee, and shall possess it, and shall dwell therein, and shall say, I will set a king over me, like as all the nations that are about me, thou shalt in any wise set him king over thee, whom Yahweh by Shem Yahushua thy power shall choose. One from among thy brethren thou shalt set a king over thee. Thou mayest not set a stranger over thee, which is not thy brother. Right? So you ultimately voting, right, on one of these different, presidents and whatnot, right? You're ultimately, voting, right, for one of these, strangers, right, to be your king, to be your president, right? And we know that, Donald Trump, right, is currently, operating, as a king, right, as a ruler, right? Hence the, the No Kings protests, right? It's spiritual, right? So again, right, you ultimately voting. That's against, right, the scriptures. That's against, the law, statutes, commandments of Yahweh Shem Yahshua. Right, so we're not supposed to be voting. We were telling y'all, right, don't be voting, for these people. First and foremost, right, it's according to the law, right, and two, right, they don't have your, your best interests at heart, man. They don't have. They ultimately have their in mind is your worst interest, man. Esau wants to do you harm, right? Esau, is your enemy, right? And she found that out. Let's go to this article, right? She found that out, right? It says from rising living costs to aggressive immigration enforcement, Americans nationwide are experiencing the ripple effects of the Trump administration policies in deeply personal ways. Consequently, a familiar pattern has emerged online. Former MAGA supporters expressing anger, sadness, and deep regret when the policies they once backed started hitting too close to home. It says this is the case in a recent viral video series of a South Florida Trump voter emotional plea for a terminally ill, undocumented father to be released from ICE detention. The video circulated online after Florida-based filmmaker Billy Corbin posted them to his Instagram, amassing thousands of views and over 40,000 comments. Right? And this is her right here, right? She ultimately, and she, looks like an Israelite, right? Looks like a so-called Mexican, right? Or so-called Latino descent, right? And went and voted, for Trump and his administration. When you could see, like they were telling you openly, right, that what he was about to do, heavily, speaking on, the immigration, right, and getting rid of Israelites, man, right? He wasn't focused, right? He wasn't focused on any, and still isn't a focus on any of these heathen nations that came across, right? You had multiple different, African, Hamites, coming across, right, from different nations within the land of Ham, right, so-called Africa, that came through. All the different, the Chinese, the Japanese, right, all the so-called Asians that were coming through, as well as the so-called Arabs, right, the Ishmaelites, right, they were coming through as well. Right? All the different nations were coming through the border during the time of Biden when they were opening up the floods, which that was just, that was planned, right? It's all part of the plan, because again, both sides work together, right? They don't work in opposition to one another. Really, that whole, the left versus the right really is just a facade, man, to distract you people, right, and get you people riled up, right, and get you caught up in the drama, right, the confusion, and this is what has happened, right? You people are caught up in it, right? You think it's real, and look, right, you went ahead and voted, right, basically for their system, right, for both the left and the right system, which is really the elite system, right, and how they wanted you to, ultimately operate and vote and so on and so forth, man. Look, and that's your fault, man. For those of you that, that ultimately voted, for Esau, that's that's your fault, right? Let's go back to that Sirach. I don't want to get too much on that. Let's go back to Sirach 12 and verse 10, right? It says, never trust thine enemy. It's a heavy one, very important too, right? Never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness, right? And we're at the point where, hey, that rust, that wickedness, man, is showing heavily, you know. And rust is you know, almost impossible to get out. You got to grind it, you know. You might have to just throw it back in there and just redo the whole thing, man. Throw it back in the kiln, let it melt, and redo the whole thing, you know, at that point, man, you know. But this is a kind of wickedness, right? A rust that, you know, cannot be taken away, right? Whether you grind it, remelt it, don't matter, right? Esau is wicked from the very beginning, right, of creation. Esau has been the wicked, right? And we're not to trust this devil, man. We told y'all this when it came to the, you know, the scamdemic, right? Starting with the elder apostles, the great millstone on down, right? Right, as well as the men that have come up under him, whether they be a great millstone or a true great millstone affiliate, you know. We told y'all this, man. You know, never trust this enemy. Especially when it came to the scamdemic. And see, now you got a lot of people that are fucking dying in the millions. People that, you know, that were falling just dead on their face in the middle of a, you know, a sports game, right? Teens and shit. Just dying. Celebrities, CEOs, so on and so forth, dying. You know? And we told y'all, right, not to take it. You know, and here you go again, right? Getting, you know, tricked again, right? For voting for Trump and whatnot, man. You know, it says, verse 11, though he humble himself and go crouching, yet take good heed and beware of him, right? Right? It says, and thou shalt be as, it says, yet take good heed and beware of him, and thou shalt be unto him as if thou hast wiped away a looking glass, right? And thou shalt know that his rust hath not been altogether wiped away, right? Because he's wicked to the core, right? You're not going to be able to, you know, he's not going to be able to get rid of that wicked, right? As the scriptures say, right? Can the Ethiopian change his skin, right? Or a leopard his spots, right? Then he that is accustomed to do evil, right? Can he do good? Rightfully paraphrase? No. You know, no. You know, Esau is wicked and will always be wicked, right? It says, set him not by thee, lest when he hath overthrown thee, he stand up in that place. Neither let him sit at thy right hand, right? Because he's always watching, right? Esau always looking to take something from somebody, man. You know, you go into Habakkuk, the 2nd chapter, right? He heapeth unto him all nations. You know, Esau's always going into these different places, man, and taking the people's land, their culture, right? Their resources. Esau always wants something of somebody, man. Look what just happened in Venezuela. You know, they went into Venezuela, captured Maduro, right? Took him in the, you know, the dead of night, using these radio frequency rays, if you will, right? A small crew going in there, snatching them up, and then what did they do? Right? They took control of the oil and openly came out and told you that. You know, that it was about the oil, it was about the resources. Right, this is how this devil moves, man. You know, and it goes all the way down to these regular peons. They have the same mindset, right? They're wicked, right? They want to take your job. They want to take your seat, right? They want to take your life. They want to take everything that you got, right? Because they're greedy, right? They're insatiable. You know, it says, set him not by thee, lest when he has overthrown thee, he stand up, right, in thy place. Neither let him sit at thy right hand, lest he seek to take thy seat. And thou shalt at last remember my words and be pricked therewith. And this is what happened, right? Like, damn, I shouldn't have voted, right? What people were telling her, right? That's your fault, right? They were telling you what they were going to do, and you still listen, right? It says, who will pity a charmer that is bitten with a serpent, or any such as come nigh wild beasts? No one. No one's going to show pity. And this is what she got. This is what she received, right, from the people, right? The responses, right, that she received. Right here said, days later, the woman filmed a follow-up video reflecting on the part she believes she played in her father's circumstances by voting for Trump. When I voted for Trump, she says, I supported the very system that allows this kind of cruelty to happen. I spent the last few days reflecting, and I feel like I've come through some sort of revelation. Well, no fucking duh, right? It says, I regret my vote so deeply, and if I could go back and change it, I would. She says, I'm reading, listening, learning, and unlearning everything I thought I knew, right? You should have been listening in the first place. Right? It says, despite the woman's emotional reflection, people in the comments aren't so quick to offer sympathy. Right here's one of the quotes. It says, but if your dad wasn't arrested, would you still have those regrets? One commenter asked, right? If she wasn't affected, would she still think the same way? You know? It says, stop blaming others for your choices. One wrote another person. They shared that they also grew up in a red state, yet managed to avoid the conservative propaganda that the woman, right, says shaped her views. Right, there's that quote. Right here, the conversation made its way to Reddit, where people also struggled to muster much compassion. No one deserves to go through this, but darling, this was exactly what the shit stain and his racist psychophants told you they wanted. What did you think? You were excluded, right? So there you go, right? They weren't, you weren't getting no sympathy, right, because of your decision. First and foremost, they were letting you know, right? And I mean, first and foremost, the men of the Lord were warning you prior for years never to trust this damn devil. That's first and foremost with the spirit and power of Yahweh Shemel Shai, right? But even leading up into the situation, more and more people, right, are starting to see who Esau, Edom, and who he is, right? Because the message is going out, right? The Esau's agenda and who he is being revealed. We're currently in the state where the Lord is continuing, to heavily, air out his dirty laundry, man. So everybody's starting to see this damn devil, man, right? So more and more people were seeing who, right through his, his bullshit, right? The Lord destroying the wisdom out of Teman. Esau not able to hide himself anymore, More and more people were seeing it. So it's like, come on, man. There's no excuse at this point, right? It says, verse 14, Sirach, I'll read verse 13 again, Sirach 12 and 13, who will pity a charmer that is bitten with a serpent, or any such as come nigh wild beasts? No one, right? Because you knew what you were coming up against, right? It was told to you, you got snakes, they have the rattler, right? They rattle you, hey, I want to back up, It's giving you a warning. Right, and we were giving out that warning, right? So I'm with the elder apostles of Great Millstone, right? We were giving out that warning, right? Letting you know about this damn devil, but you didn't take heed to it. You got bit anyways, right? It says, so one that goeth to a sinner and is defiled with him in his sins, who will pity? For a while he will abide with thee, but if thou begin to fall, he will not tarry, right? An enemy speaketh sweetly with his lips, but in his heart he imagineth how to throw thee into a pit. He will weep with his eyes, but if he find opportunity, he will not be satisfied with blood. So he might just sit there and, act like he's for you, be real calm, humble, this, that, and the third. But hey, right when he gets what he wants, all of a sudden the switch flips. Now you're going to see his true colors, Now you're going to see his true colors. And we're starting to see Esau's true colors, man, as the days go on, right? That rust is being seen more and more. More and more, right? Verse 17, it says, if adversity come upon thee, thou shalt find him there first. And though he pretend to help thee, yet shall he undermine thee. He will shake his head and clap his hands and whisper much and change his countenance, man. And that's Esau, Edom, right? So why we tell you never to trust thine enemy, man, because at the end of the day, the beginning and the end of the day, right, this damn devil is always going to be wicked. He wants to get rid of you Israelites, man. He wants to kill y'all. Right now, we're in a war. Right, and Esau has waged war on you Israelites, you so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, man. Right, so don't ever trust this damn devil, man. Do what you got to do. Walk according to the wisdom, right? The words of Yahweh Shemel Shai to the best of your ability, right? In these days, if ICE ultimately approaches you or whatnot, man, have all your documentation ready, right? Just hurry up and, as it says in Matthew's the 5th chapter, right? Agree with thy adversary, right? Matthew 5 and 25, or agree with thy adversary when thou art on the way with him, right? And so that way you can go on about your business, man. But other than that, hey, man, fuck this damn devil, man. Esau going down, man. But nonetheless, never trust this damn devil, man. Right? Because as he continues to, be pushed back into a corner, he's gonna lash out even more, man. And we're gonna see that here soon. Esau finna flash, man, for real. You know, so with that, Lord wills, Lord wills, edifying, Lord wills, straight to the point. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rechak, Wadash, double honor, said the elder apostles, the elder bishops of Great Millstone. Till next time, I say shalom.